Jack Fletcher wasn't special, not by Earth standards anyway. Back home he'd been an unremarkable man with an unremarkable life and an unremarkable penchant for historical documentaries about revolutions. But out here, orbiting the galactic core in a station that housed representatives from over 3,000 species, Jack Fletcher was something truly extraordinary. He was the only human being with enough patience to clean alien toilets for a living. Maintenance technician, waste management division, read his identification badge. In reality he was a glorified janitor with security clearance to every bathroom in the Galactic Senate. Fletcher, there's been another incident in the Krulaxian facilities, came the grating voice of his supervisor, Gleep, over the comm system. Gleep was a gelatinous blob who, ironically, produced more waste than any species Jack had ever encountered. Of course there has, Jack muttered, grabbing his specialized cleaning equipment. Let me guess. They missed the 20-foot-wide receptacle again. Please remember protocol when addressing the noble Krulaxian dignitaries. Jack rolled his eyes. Right. I'll be sure to bow while I'm scooping their excrement off the ceiling. This was the reality of humanity's place in the grand galactic confederation. When Earth had finally been discovered 50 years ago, the advanced species of the galaxy had been distinctly underwhelmed. Humans weren't telepathic like the Vordaini. They couldn't phase through solid matter like the Quib. They didn't even have the decency to photosynthesize their own food like any self-respecting sentient species should. What they did have, however, was an uncanny ability to handle the disgusting, the tedious, and the menial. Human resilience, it turned out, was their superpower. That, and an inexplicable talent for creating reality entertainment that addicted even the most intellectually superior species. Jack whistled an ancient Earth tune as he pushed his cleaning cart through the grandiose halls of the Senate building. He nodded at passing diplomats who barely acknowledged his existence. Most saw humans as useful primitives, worker bees, who could handle the jobs no respectable alien wanted. Hey, Vorax, Jack called out to a tall mantis-like creature in flowing diplomatic robes. Did you catch that newest episode of Real Housewives of Alpha Centauris? I sent you. The dignified diplomat from Sector 7 twitched his antennae in what Jack had come to recognize as embarrassment. That is hardly appropriate viewing material for one of my station, human Fletcher. But you watched it. I may have observed portions. For cultural research purposes. Vorax hurried away, mandibles clicking nervously. That was another thing about Jack. Unlike most humans who secured positions in the Galactic Senate, he refused to be properly awed. 6 years of cleaning up after beings who considered themselves gods had thoroughly inoculated him against the majesty of it all. Jack turned a corner and nearly collided with a procession of Bulgarian monks, their tentacles wrapped in ceremonial silver chains. Pardon me, holy ones, he said with an exaggerated bow. Just your friendly neighborhood human, making the universe safe for democracy, one toilet brush at a time. The monks floated past him, radiating disapproval from their eye stalks. As Jack continued his journey to the Krulaxian disaster area, he passed the central viewing hall where dozens of diplomats were gathered around the massive holographic display. Breaking news, apparently. Emperor Zorn, to make unprecedented Senate appearance, scrolled the universal translator beneath images of what looked like a giant purple turkey wearing enough jewelry to sink a battleship. Well, Jack muttered, his royal purpleness himself. That'll make for an interesting day. It certainly would, though not in the way anyone, least of all Jack Fletcher, human janitor and accidental revolutionary, could possibly imagine. The Galactic Senate erupted into a flurry of activity as news of Emperor Zorn's impending arrival spread. Dignitaries preened, security protocols tightened, and maintenance staff, particularly the human maintenance staff, were ordered to make themselves scarce. All non-essential personnel must vacate public areas during His Supreme Magnificence procession, announced Gleep over the comm system. That means you, Fletcher. Jack snorted as he finished disinfecting the Krulaxian bathroom disaster. Sure thing, boss. I'll just leave this partially cleaned biohazard for His Supreme Magnificence to discover. Complete your task and then make yourself invisible. Gleep's voice quivered with anxiety. Emperor Zorn has never personally visited the Senate. This is unprecedented. That much was true. For the 300 years of the Galactic Confederation's existence, Emperor Zorn had ruled from the distant imperial palace on Centauri Prime. His word was law, his whims were policy, and his appearances were as rare as honest politicians. Jack finished his cleaning and was pushing his cart through the grand concourse when the announcement came. Attention all beings. The divine personage of Emperor Zorn, ruler of the 7 spiral arms, keeper of the cosmic flame, and master of 10,000 worlds, will arrive in precisely 10 minutes. Prepare to receive his blessed presence. 10,000 worlds. Talk about real estate inflation, Jack muttered. Last month it was 9,800. The hallways became a chaos of important aliens rushing to take their positions. Jack attempted to navigate his cart through the crowd, but found himself trapped as a security detail blocked his exit route. He backed into an alcove, hoping to wait it out. That's when the imperial processional began. First came the heralds, tall, violet-plumed avians, who announced the emperor's titles in 17 different languages. Then the imperial guards with their energy staves and ridiculous helmet crests that scraped the ceiling. Finally, carried on a floating platform by anti-gravity generators, Emperor Zorn himself appeared. Jack had seen pictures, but nothing prepared him for the reality. Emperor Zorn was massive, at least 9 feet tall, with purple feathered limbs ending in golden talons. His beak was encrusted with rare gems, and a crown of what appeared to be miniature stars hovered above his head. Most striking were his eyes, 4 of them, each rotating independently like some bizarro chameleon. "Behold the divine emperor," cried the heralds. The assembled diplomats dropped to various forms of genuflection. Some bowed, others prostrated, a few secreted ceremonial mucus. Jack, tucked in his alcove, simply watched with raised eyebrows. The emperor's procession glided past Jack's hiding spot and into the central chamber where the Senate awaited. Jack exhaled in relief. Crisis averted. Now he just needed to wait for them to pass through, and he could get back to, "What is that smell?" The emperor's voice boomed through the hall, magnified by ceremonial amplifier. The procession halted abruptly. Jack froze. He'd just finished cleaning the Krulaxian facilities. Despite his best efforts, the specialized disinfectant had a distinct odor that clung to his uniform. One by one, the emperor's 4 eyes swiveled in different directions until all focused directly on Jack's alcove. "You approach." The command left no room for argument. Jack reluctantly rolled his cart forward, aware of hundreds of horrified alien stares. "A human," Emperor Zorn observed, his beak clacking in what might have been amusement. "How quaint." Jack bowed awkwardly. "You're a supreme magnificence. You emit an unusual fragrance." "Sorry about that, Your Highness. Just finished cleaning the Krulaxian bathrooms. Those guys have digestive systems you wouldn't believe." A collective gasp echoed through the hall. One did not discuss bodily functions in the divine presence. One especially did not do so while reeking of industrial-strength alien feces remover. The Emperor's head tilted curiously. "The humans remain refreshingly direct. Tell me, small creature, what position do you hold in this august body?" "I'm the guy who cleans up everybody's messes," Jack replied, then added, literally and sometimes figuratively. Emperor Zorn leaned forward on his floating platform. "Explain." Jack hadn't meant to elaborate, but something about being called a small creature, after a particularly difficult day, hit a nerve. "Well, Your Magnificence, when the Vrexian delegation gets food poisoning from eating outside their dietary restrictions, I'm there with a mop. When the Hydroxy and the Pyronites have one of their elemental temper tantrums and flood or burn the negotiation rooms, I fix it. When Ambassador Krill's emotional support slug escapes and leaves slime trails through the ventilation system, guess who crawls through with a scraper?" The Emperor's beak clacked again, using. "The primitive has spirit. That did it. 6 years of being talked down to, treated as less than sentient, and now this overgrown purple turkey with a god complex was calling him primitive." Jack Fletcher, descendant of revolutionary, reader of historical rebellions, and master of the toilet brush, felt something snap inside him. "You know what? I'm not primitive. I'm essential. This entire station would collapse into a biohazardous mess within a week without humans like me keeping it running. But sure, laugh at the janitor, very original." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a whisper fly's wings. Security guards raised their weapons. Diplomats froze in horror. The Emperor's 4 eyes widened in what might have been shock or outrage. "You dare address the divine presence with such familiarity?" The Emperor's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow seemed more threatening than his booming proclamations. One of the heralds stepped forward. "Your divinity, shall we execute the human for his insolence?" Jack swallowed hard. Perhaps he'd miscalculated. "Silence," commanded the Emperor, his eyes still locked on Jack. "The human shall be given an opportunity to prostrate himself and beg forgiveness." All eyes turned to Jack, waiting for the inevitable groveling. Instead, Jack Fletcher straightened his shoulders, looked directly at Emperor Zorn, and said the words that would change galactic history forever. "Yeah, I don't think I will." The collective gasp that swept through the Senate hall could have depressurized a small moon. Guards raised their weapons, diplomats pressed emergency buttons, and at least 3 species began their religious end-of-existence rituals. Emperor Zorn's feathers puffed up to twice their normal size, his beak opening and closing in what appeared to be shock. No one, in 3 centuries of absolute rule, had ever refused to beg for forgiveness. Perhaps, the Emperor finally said, his voice dangerously soft, the human does not understand the consequence of his actions. Jack understood perfectly well. 6 years of watching alien politics had taught him that Emperor Zorn's rule was built on elaborate ceremony and unquestioning obedience. The second anyone challenged either, they disappeared faster than free alcohol at an embassy reception. Yet something inside Jack had fundamentally broken. Maybe it was cleaning one too many alien bathrooms. Maybe it was being called primitive for the 1000th time. Or maybe it was simply that human rebellious streak that had driven his ancestors to flip off kings, overthrow dictators, and occasionally toss perfectly good tea into harbors. "Oh, I understand," Jack replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "But here's the thing about humans, your magnificence. We have this funny habit of standing up when we should kneel down." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "You will die for this insolence." "Probably," Jack agreed. "But before your goons vaporize me, I'd like to show you something." With a speed that surprised even himself, Jack grabbed the edge of the Emperor's floating platform and yanked it down to his level. The anti-grav generators whined in protest as Jack's human strength, unremarkable by Earth standards, but startling to aliens who had only seen humans scrubbing floors, destabilized the platform's balance. Emperor Zorn squawked in undignified surprise as his royal posterior slid toward the edge. Jack seized the opportunity, and the Emperor's ornate ceremonial robes in one fluid motion. "Let me give you the tour that regular dignitaries don't get," Jack announced, pulling the sputtering Emperor off his platform. "I think you should see how this place really works." Security forces froze in confusion. The Emperor was being physically handled, something explicitly forbidden in 10,000 years of Zenturian tradition. Yet Emperor Zorn hadn't given the order to fire. The Imperial guards looked to their superior, who seemed equally paralyzed by the unprecedented situation. Jack, still gripping the Emperor's jewel-encrusted robes, began walking briskly down the corridor. To everyone's astonishment, the Emperor stumbled along, too shocked to resist. "First stop, the Central Processing Department," Jack narrated loudly, pulling his royal captive past rows of stunned onlookers. "Did you know that relief supplies for the Outer Rim drought have been sitting here for 6 months, because someone didn't file Form XB 728 in triplicate? 3 million people on Centauri Minor are drinking recycled urine while bureaucrats argue about paperwork." The Emperor's head swiveled toward the mentioned department, where indeed, crates marked emergency relief were gathering dust. "What is the meaning of?" he began, but Jack was already dragging him to the next stop. "Over here we have the petition office. See these data terminals? They contain 17 million unanswered pleas from colonists in the Lambda sector whose atmosphere processors are failing. Your administration marked them under review 8 years ago." Jack's pace quickened as he warmed to his subject. His mind raced through all the history he'd consumed about rebellions and revolutions. The Boston Tea Party, the storming of the Bastille, Gandhi's Salt March, Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat. Sometimes, one person just had to do something spectacularly stupid to change everything. "And this," Jack continued, yanking the Emperor past a massive doorway, "is the Senate chamber where your representatives spend 16 hours a day debating the official color of your portrait, while ignoring actual problems." By now, a peculiar procession had formed, Jack in the lead, dragging the increasingly bewildered Emperor Zorn, followed by panicking Imperial guards, who couldn't decide whether to shoot the human and risk hitting their divine ruler, followed by curious diplomats recording everything on their communication devices, followed by maintenance staff, including several humans who were watching with expressions ranging from horror to barely concealed delight. "Did you know," Jack said, pulling the Emperor down another corridor, "that on Earth we had this thing called term limits? Leaders actually had to step down after a while." "Crazy concept, I know." The Emperor had recovered enough from his shock to dig his talons into the floor, forcing Jack to stop. The procession behind them ground to a halt. "Release me at once," Emperor Zorn commanded, though his voice lacked its usual resonant authority. Jack turned to face him. "Sure thing, just as soon as you visit one more place." Before the Emperor could respond, Jack pivoted and kicked open a door labeled Maintenance Access Only. "Welcome," he announced, pulling the Emperor into the room, "to where I work." The maintenance area was a stark contrast to the opulent Senate halls. Dingy lighting illuminated racks of cleaning supplies, broken equipment awaiting repair, and the small break room where humans and other service species took their meals. Several off-duty janitors looked up from their synthetic protein cubes, eyes widening as they recognized who Jack had brought to dinner. "Your Magnificence," Jack said with mock formality. Meet the people who actually keep your Galactic Senate functioning. The ones you call primitives. The ones who handle the shit that no one else wants to touch, both literal and figurative. Emperor Zorn stood in the center of the maintenance room, his jeweled robes absurdly out of place among the industrial cleaners and spare parts. For the first time in perhaps centuries, the divine ruler of 10,000 worlds appeared utterly speechless. And that was when the security teams finally caught up, weapons drawn and aimed directly at Jack Fletcher's head. News traveled faster than light across the Galactic Confederation. Within minutes, footage of a human janitor dragging Emperor Zorn through the hallowed halls of the Senate was streaming to every corner of known space. On the desert planet Krizik, Hive Mother Tekla's 18 eyes blinked in disbelief as she watched the feed with her brood. The human touches the Divine One and still lives. In the methane swamps of Vordok's Ford, gaseous entities coalesced around public view screens, their translucent bodies vibrating with excitement. Is this some sort of human religious ritual? One burbled to another. Aboard the Generation ship Eternal Wanderer, the captain replayed the footage for the 5th time. Look at the Emperor's facial markings, he told his first officer. They've changed from purple to blue. I've never seen that before. Even in the remote outposts of the Andromeda Arm, where news typically arrived weeks late, operators broke into regular programming to broadcast what was already being called the incident. And in the maintenance room of the Galactic Senate, Jack Fletcher stared down the business end of 30 energy weapons, wondering if his mother had been right about his big mouth eventually getting him killed. Hold your fire, Emperor Zorn commanded, raising one golden-taloned hand. The security forces hesitated, weapons still aimed at Jack's head. But your divinity, protested the security chief, a reptilian with more metals than sense. This human has committed the highest form of sacrilege. The penalty is immediate disintegration. Emperor Zorn's 4 eyes rotated independently, taking in the maintenance room and its occupants. The other janitors had pressed themselves against the walls, trying to become invisible. A forgotten cup of synthetic coffee steamed on a breakroom table. A holographic image of someone's family flickered beside a locker. I wish to understand, the Emperor finally said, his voice quieter than before. Why did you do this, human? Jack, who had been mentally composing his last words, blinked in surprise. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I guess I just got tired of being invisible. Explain. Jack gestured around the room. Every day we clean your messes, fix your problems, and keep everything running smoothly. We're essential to this whole operation, but you treat us like we're nothing. Less than nothing, like we're some primitive species you're doing a favor by letting us scrub your toilets. One of the other janitors, a nervous Terran named Miguel, cleared his throat. It's true, Your Magnificence. We submit maintenance requests that never get approved. Our living quarters have had faulty life support for 3 cycles. When we file complaints about certain diplomats' treatment of staff, they disappear into the system. Emperor Zorn's head tilted, feathers settling into a more neutral position. To Jack's surprise, the Emperor lowered himself onto one of the breakroom chairs, a scandalous breach of protocol that caused several guards to gasp audibly. Continue, the Emperor said. Outside the maintenance room, the spectacle was growing. Diplomats, administrators, and curious staff members crowded the hallway, straining to see and hear what was happening. Recording devices hovered everywhere, transmitting the unprecedented scene across the galaxy. Emperor Zorn is sitting in a human chair, exclaimed Ambassador Krill to his aide. This hasn't happened since the great conclave of Rigel, when his ancestors sat upon the throne of destiny. Look at the human, whispered another diplomat. He shows no fear. Inside, Jack found himself in the bizarre position of having the Emperor's full attention. Something about the surreal nature of the situation gave him courage. Your people are suffering, Jack continued. Not just the maintenance staff, whole planets. I've seen the reports that come through. Collapsed ecosystems on the outer colonies, resource shortages in the Cygnus Arm. Meanwhile, the Senate debates luxury taxes on recreational space yachts. To everyone's shock, Emperor Zorn picked up Miguel's abandoned coffee cup and examined it curiously. This beverage, he said, it is what sustains you. Miguel nodded nervously. Yes, Your Magnificence. It's a synthetic approximation of an earth drink, called coffee. The real stuff is too expensive to import. The Emperor raised the cup to his beak and took a sip. His feathers ruffled violently, and he made a sound that might have been a cough or a laugh. Fascinating, he declared. Bitter yet stimulating. The entire room watched in stunned silence, as the divine ruler of 10,000 worlds drank synthetic coffee from a maintenance worker's cup. Outside the room, the spectacle had evolved. News anchors were providing live commentary, experts were being consulted, and betting pools were forming on whether the human would be executed quickly or slowly. This is unprecedented, reported Vex Starbright of Galactic News Network, her antenna quivering with excitement. For those just joining us, a human maintenance worker has physically dragged Emperor Zorn through the Senate halls and is now apparently engaging him in casual conversation over refreshments. On thousands of worlds, billions of beings watched, commented, shared, and speculated. Many secretly cheered for the audacious human, though few would admit it publicly. In the depths of the Outer Rim territories, a group of miners huddled around an ancient view screen. Did he really call out the relief supply situation? One asked incredulously. Someone finally told the Emperor about that. Back in the Senate, the standoff continued. Security forces remained at attention, weapons ready. The Emperor remained seated, drinking coffee, and Jack Fletcher, human janitor and accidental revolutionary, found himself becoming the voice of countless overlooked beings throughout the galaxy. Your entire system is built on appearances and tradition instead of actually solving problems, Jack said, warming to his subject. You've got 17 layers of bureaucracy between you and reality. When was the last time you actually saw how regular people live in your empire? Emperor Zorn's eyes blinked in sequence, a sign that cultural experts would later interpret as deep contemplation. 342 cycles, he finally admitted. Jack shook his head. That's your problem right there. A murmur ran through the crowd outside. The Emperor had just acknowledged a failing to a janitor. The Galactic Order was clearly collapsing. Unprecedented, whispered Ambassador Vorax to a colleague. The human speaks to him as an equal. Madness, replied the colleague. Yet the Emperor allows it. The universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would tradition reassert itself with the human's execution, or was something fundamental changing in the relationship between the divine Emperor and his subjects? The answer came from an unexpected direction. A soft chime sounded, and Jack's comm device lit up with an incoming message. The room fell silent as Jack checked it. Well, he said, looking up at Emperor Zorn with a wry smile, it seems I'm being fired for gross insubordination and violation of imperial protocols. Apparently, dragging an emperor through the Senate halls isn't in my job description. Emperor Zorn's beak clacked 3 times, a sound that cultural experts would spend years analyzing. Was it amusement, offense, a digestive issue? Whatever it was, what the Emperor said next would be replayed on news channels across the galaxy for weeks to come. Perhaps, Emperor Zorn declared, rising to his full height, it should be. 3 days after what galactic media had dubbed the hallway incident, Jack Fletcher sat in a room he never thought he'd enter, the Imperial suite aboard the Senate station. The furniture was designed for beings twice his size, leaving his feet dangling above the floor like a child's. The walls displayed real-time holograms of stellar phenomena, giving the unsettling impression that one was floating through space rather than sitting in a chair. This is ridiculous, Jack muttered to himself, tugging at the collar of his new diplomatic attire, a uniform that someone had hastily assembled for him after his maintenance jumpsuit was deemed unsuitable for advisory personnel. The door hissed open, and Ambassador Vorax entered, his mantis-like form moving with practiced elegance. Human Fletcher, he said, mandibles clicking nervously. His divine magnificence will see you now. Great, Jack said, sliding off the too large chair. Any chance you could explain why I'm not dead yet? Not complaining, just curious. Ambassador Vorax's antenna twitched. The Emperor's decisions are beyond our understanding. That's bureaucrat speak, for I have no idea, Jack replied. The ambassador led him through a series of increasingly opulent rooms until they reached what appeared to be a garden. Real plants, not holograms, grew in carefully arranged patterns. In the center, Emperor Zorn stood beside a small earth tree that Jack recognized as a bonsai. You have arrived, the Emperor stated, his 4 eyes swiveling toward Jack. Approach. Jack walked forward, feeling distinctly underdressed despite his new uniform. Ambassador Vorax bowed deeply and retreated, leaving them alone. So Jack said, breaking the awkward silence, am I here for a delayed execution, or, your species uses humor as a defense mechanism? Emperor Zorn observed. Fascinating, among other things, Jack agreed. The Emperor gestured toward the bonsai. This specimen, it is from your world. Yes, it's a bonsai tree. Humans shape them to grow small and in specific patterns. You constrain its natural growth, yet it thrives. The Emperor's talons gently touched a tiny leaf. Adaptation within limitation. Perhaps this is also the secret of human resilience. Jack wasn't sure if he was having a horticultural discussion or a philosophical one. Did you bring me here to talk about trees, your magnificence? I brought you here because you did something no being has done in 3 centuries of my rule. The Emperor's feathers shifted into what Jack was beginning to recognize as a contemplative pattern. You spoke truth without fear. Most people would call it suicidal stupidity. Indeed, yet it revealed something important. The Emperor turned all four eyes directly on Jack. Do you know the history of my species, human Fletcher? Jack shook his head. Before we achieved space travel, Zentorians lived in hierarchical tribes. Leadership was challenged through ritual combat. The Emperor's beak clacked. Over time, as we became civilized, physical confrontation was replaced with elaborate ceremony. Okay, Jack said slowly, and this relates to me dragging you through the Senate because, in our ancient traditions, one who physically challenges authority without fear of death is considered to be speaking the most profound truth. The Emperor's voice dropped to a surprisingly normal volume. In our earliest writings it is said, when one risks all to move the mountain must listen. Jack blinked at the Emperor's sudden shift to non-amplified speech. So, you're not executing me because I accidentally performed some ancient Zentorian truth-telling ritual. Precisely. Huh. Jack wasn't sure whether to laugh or be annoyed. So if I'd known that, I could have just challenged you to ritual combat instead of risking disintegration. The ignorance of your action made it genuine. The Emperor moved away from the bonsai. What you did has already had consequences. As if on cue, a holographic display activated, showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Jack's eyes widened as he took in the images. On Rigel 7, citizens were physically dragging local governors through public squares. In the Cygnus Collective, protesters had formed human chains around supply depots, demanding fair distribution of resources. Even in the Central Core worlds, traditionally loyal to the Emperor, demonstrations were occurring, many led by maintenance workers and service staff. Holy shit, Jack breathed. I started a revolution, you provided a spark, the Emperor corrected. The fuel was already present. Another news feed showed Imperial troops delivering the long-delayed relief supplies to drought-stricken worlds. Yet another displayed bureaucrats being removed from offices, replaced by what appeared to be field experts. You're actually fixing the problems I mentioned, Jack said in disbelief. As Emperor, I cannot appear to respond to pressure. Zorn's feathers ruffled. Officially, these are initiatives that were already planned. But unofficially, human Fletcher, you have created what my advisors are calling a diplomatic crisis of unprecedented proportions. The Emperor's beak clacked in what Jack was now certain was amusement. It is most refreshing. Jack ran a hand through his hair. So what happens now? Back to the janitor's closet for me. That would be inefficient. The Emperor activated another holographic display, showing an official document. You are being appointed as Special Advisor on Internal Affairs, with focus on infrastructure and resource allocation. Jack stared at the document, then at the Emperor. You want me to work for you, after I humiliated you in front of the entire galaxy? You misunderstand. Emperor Zorn's voice had an edge to it. You will not work for me. You will work with me. There is a difference. Before Jack could respond, another series of news feeds appeared. These showed humans throughout the galaxy being approached for positions, consulted on problems, invited into meetings they'd previously been excluded from. Your people are being re-evaluated, the Emperor said, dropping the ceremonial amplification again. Their directness and willingness to address problems instead of navigating protocol has proven valuable. All because I lost my temper and grabbed your robes. All because you spoke truth to power, regardless of consequence. The Emperor's eyes fixed on Jack. This is a quality my empire has lacked for too long. Jack looked at the official appointment again. Special Advisor. It was a far cry from scrubbing toilets. Yet something didn't sit right. What's the catch? He asked. Perceptive, the Emperor acknowledged. There are conditions. You will participate in imperial ceremonies. You will learn our protocols. And here, the Emperor leaned forward, lowering his voice again. You will continue to speak truth when others will not. Jack considered this. Become a court truth-teller with diplomatic immunity. It wasn't the worst offer he'd ever received. I'm going to need something in writing about that last part, Jack said. And I want better quarters and equipment for the maintenance staff. Already ordered, and an actual coffee machine. The real stuff, not synthetic. Acceptable. Jack stuck out his hand, then realized the Emperor probably didn't shake hands. To his surprise, Emperor Zorn extended his taloned appendage and awkwardly grasped Jack's hand. Does this conclude our negotiation? The Emperor asked. I think it's just the beginning, Jack replied. I've got about 6 years of complaints saved up. Anticipate interesting times ahead, Human Fletcher. As Jack left the Imperial suite with his new appointment, he passed Ambassador Vorex, whose antennae were practically tied in knots with anxiety. Is it true? The ambassador whispered. You're joining the Imperial Advisory Council. Apparently, Jack said with a shrug. Hey, quick question. Does this position come with better bathroom access? Because the maintenance facilities are always overcrowded during shift changes. As Ambassador Vorex sputtered in confusion, Jack smiled to himself. The galaxy might never be the same, but at least the bathrooms might improve. That alone made dragging an emperor through the Senate halls worth it. 6 months after the hallway incident, Jack Fletcher stood before the full Galactic Senate in ceremonial robes that he'd personally redesigned to include hidden pockets. His official title, Special Imperial Advisor on Practical Solutions, had been the subject of intense debate among protocol officers who hadn't appreciated his original suggestion of official Imperial BS detector. Representatives of the Galactic Confederation, Jack began. His voice carried through the chamber's acoustics. I present the quarterly infrastructure report, which unlike previous reports, is actually readable by beings without 17 PhDs or psychic abilities. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. 6 months ago, such informality would have been scandalous. Now it was merely Jack being Jack. The short version, he continued, is that we've cleared 62% of the supply chain bottlenecks, reduced bureaucratic approval steps by half, and actually delivered aid to where it's needed. Amazing what happens when you focus on solving problems instead of filling out forms. In his designated observation box, Emperor Zorn's feathers shifted in what everyone now recognized as approval. The Emperor had undergone subtle but significant changes in the past months. His ceremonial robes were slightly less ostentatious. His public addresses included occasional segments without the booming amplification. Most shocking to galactic society, he had begun making regular inspection tours of actual facilities rather than just attending ceremonial functions. Critics called it the humanization of the Emperor, as if it were a disease. Supporters called it the Imperial Renaissance. Jack called it common sense. Next item, Jack said, consulting his notes, the maintenance staff restructuring. This had been Jack's pet project, and the source of his first major clash with the Imperial bureaucracy. It turned out that even an emperor's special advisor couldn't simply overhaul centuries of hierarchical tradition without encountering resistance. All maintenance personnel have been reclassified as essential infrastructure technicians, with corresponding pay increases and benefits, Jack announced. Additionally, the new training program has begun, with 200 technicians now qualified for advanced system repairs. What Jack didn't mention was the late-night argument he'd had with the Imperial Budget Director, which had ended with Jack threatening to drag yet another official through a public space if the funds weren't allocated properly. The rumor that the budget director had actually fainted was greatly exaggerated. He'd merely experienced a temporary loss of consciousness due to stress. At least that was the official story. After the Senate session concluded, Jack found himself cornered by Ambassador Vorex, whose initial horror at Jack's appointment had evolved into a begrudging respect. Human Fletcher, the mantis-like diplomat said, mandibles clicking in what Jack had learned was amusement. Your presentation was remarkably restrained. I recall your first address to the Senate involved the phrase "head up your collective alien asses." I'm evolving, Jack replied with a shrug. Learning when to be diplomatic and when to be direct. Indeed. Although I notice your diplomacy tends to emerge when addressing the Emperor's pet projects, while your directness appears when dealing with those who oppose them. Jack grinned. Pure coincidence. As they walked through the Senate halls, the same halls where Jack had once dragged Emperor Zorn, Jack noticed how differently people regarded him now. Gone were the dismissive glances and barely concealed contempt. In their place was something that looked suspiciously like respect. You know what the strangest part is, Jack said to Vorex. 6 months ago, I was invisible, now I can't go anywhere without being recognized. Fame is a peculiar burden, Vorex observed. It's not just me though. Jack gestured toward a group of humans in the distance, engaged in animated discussion with a delegation of Regelians. Humans everywhere are being treated differently. We went from being the galaxy's janitors to its problem solvers overnight. Your species has a unique perspective, Vorex admitted. You see problems rather than protocols. Speaking of problems, Jack said, checking his comm device, I've got a meeting with the Emperor in 10 minutes. Vorex's antenna straightened in alarm. Then you should hurry. One does not keep the divine presence waiting, Jack laughed. Relax. Zorn's actually pretty chill about time these days. Says it gives him a chance to think without advisors buzzing around him. You refer to the Emperor by his name, Vorax sounded scandalized despite having witnessed far more shocking breaches of protocol. Only in private, Jack assured him. In public, it's still your magnificence this and divine one that. We have an understanding. The understanding, unspoken but clear, was that the galaxy needed both tradition and innovation. The ceremonial aspects of imperial rule provided comfort and continuity for billions of beings, but behind the scenes, actual problems needed actual solutions. Jack arrived at the Emperor's private garden, now a regular meeting spot for their discussions. Emperor Zorn was examining a new addition to his collection, a cactus from Earth's Arizona desert. Punctual as always, Advisor Fletcher, the Emperor noted, still using his ceremonial voice even though they were alone. Traffic was light, Jack replied. Nobody wants to get in the way of the guy who might drag them through the halls. The Emperor's beak clacked in amusement. Your reputation continues to serve you well. About that, Jack said, taking a seat on a bench that had been installed for him after the first meeting where he'd had to stand for 3 hours. I've been thinking about what happened 6 months ago. Was it really an ancient Zentorian truth-telling ritual that saved me, or did you just make that up to justify not executing me after I embarrassed you? For a long moment, the Emperor was silent, his 4 eyes rotating in different directions, a sign Jack had learned indicated deep thought or calculation. Does it matter? The Emperor finally asked. I guess not, Jack admitted. Results are what count, and the results have been not terrible. High praise indeed, Jack smiled. You know, back on Earth there's an old story about an emperor who had no clothes. Nobody would tell him he was naked because they were afraid of him, until one kid pointed it out. And what happened to this child? Nothing. The emperor realized he'd been fooled and everyone learned a lesson about speaking truth to power, a convenient narrative, Emperor Zorn observed. In most empires the child would have been eliminated. True, Jack acknowledged. Which makes you either wiser than most emperors, or better at adapting to unexpected situations. Perhaps both. The emperor turned his attention back to the cactus. This plant survives in harsh conditions because it has evolved appropriate defenses and storage capabilities. Your point. Empires, like organisms, must adapt or perish. Emperor Zorn's voice softened to its normal register. For 300 years I ruled without meaningful challenge or change. Your intervention exposed vulnerabilities in the system, so I did you a favor by publicly humiliating you. In essence, yes. The Emperor's feathers ruffled, though I would not recommend others attempt similar methods of providing feedback. Jack laughed. Don't worry, I've made it clear that my approach was a one-time thing. The new complaint system actually works now that people know someone's listening. The meeting continued with discussions of ongoing projects and new initiatives. As Jack prepared to leave, Emperor Zorn raised one last topic. The maintenance staff has submitted another request, he said, returning to his formal tone. They wish to replace their cleaning equipment with new models. Jack nodded. The current stuff is practically antique. Breaks down constantly. The request exceeds the allocated budget by 37%. Yeah, but the new equipment would reduce maintenance time by 50% and last twice as long. It's actually cost-effective in the long run. The Emperor's eyes rotated thoughtfully. The budget director will object. Let me guess, Jack said with a grin. You want me to be the bad guy again? Throw my weight around and threaten to drag him through the halls if he doesn't approve it. That would be inappropriate, the Emperor said solemnly. Then dropping his voice, but effective. I'll see what I can do, Jack promised. Though honestly, my dragging officials through halls days are probably behind me. A pity. It was quite refreshing to witness. As Jack left the Imperial Garden, he couldn't help but reflect on how strange his life had become. 6 months ago, he'd been cleaning alien toilets. Now he was helping reform an empire. Later that day, Jack visited his old maintenance department. Despite his new status, he made a point of stopping by regularly, partly to ensure their needs weren't forgotten, and partly because they were the only people in the galaxy who still treated him like a normal human being, rather than the imperial truth-teller. Jack, Miguel called out when he entered. Perfect timing, the new coffee machine arrived. The maintenance break room had been transformed. Gone were the dingy lights and worn-out furniture. In their place were comfortable seating areas, proper food preparation equipment, and in the center, like some holy relic, a top-of-the-line coffee machine from Earth. First official batch, Miguel said proudly, handing Jack a steaming cup. Real beans, not synthetic. Jack took a sip and closed his eyes in appreciation. Now this is what I call progress. All thanks to you, another technician said. Who would have thought dragging an emperor around would lead to actual coffee? It's not just about the coffee, Jack replied, though he took another appreciative sip. It's about being seen, being heard, being human, Miguel added with a smile. Speaking of which, Jack said, setting down his cup, I need your help with something. The budget director is being difficult about the new cleaning equipment. What are you going to do? Asked a technician. Drag him through the halls too. Jack grinned. No, I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to invite him to spend a day working with you all, experiencing firsthand why the equipment needs replacing. The maintenance staff erupted in laughter and cheers.